I'm Daisy Leo Asakidi, your host, and today we will be talking about something very sensitive, and our focus is on consent. We're talking about date rape and sexual abuse. Okay, so rape is rape, it is true. But when you talk to most men in Nigeria about date rape, they go like, I don't understand. When I was spending the money, did she not know? So I spent the money under duress. So if she's complaining, but it's not funny. It's not fair. When someone says no, they mean no. And we're going to start off our conversation today with a video on consent. Just take sex as tea. Okay, so equate it to tea. Then you be open and you learn. When we come back, I will introduce you to my guest and we'll get talking.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they go, "Oh my God," then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no thank you, then don't make them tea. At all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, "Yes, please. That's kind of you." And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, "Do you want tea?" because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, "But you wanted tea last week." Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, "But you wanted tea last night." If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
All right, so it's Flipside, and I'm Daisy Leo Asakidi. I have two very strong, renowned panelists today. I have very close to me Dr. Israel Aino. He's an associate professor of psychiatry. Good afternoon and welcome to Flipside.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
All right, and then my very personal person, and she's been here before, at least, and she's doing well in politics. So she's the newly elected welfare officer. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but she's in charge of welfare for the Nigerian Bar Association, Edo State chapter. I'm talking about Barrister Chinyere Ofebo. She's a legal practitioner and she's here with us today on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Daisy. Okay, so it's Welfare Secretary
Okay.
and Benin Branch.
Benin branch, not Edo State. Thanks for correcting me.
Thank you.
We're
Good
going higher.
afternoon, everyone. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, so we're talking about date rape and sexual abuse. A lot of people do not understand how you can say there is rape when I'm dating. So I'm going to start with you, Barrister Chinri. Can you explain what date rape is as a legal professional, sexual abuse, and how do they differ?
Okay, thank you, David. First off, we want to know what rape is actually. Rape is sexual relationship with a person without the person's consent. So whether you call it date rape or acquaintance rape, rape is rape. Now, in this case, date rape refers to persons who are in a romantic relationship or some form of sexual relationship. It is rape because there is no consent. So it doesn't have to be, oh, we have had sex before, or we're in the process of having sex. So long as the consent has been withdrawn, it is rape. If it goes further than that, that is date rape.
Okay. Is it different from sexual abuse?
Well, rape is under sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is a more broad term. You know, anything that has to do with sexual relationship, like I said, without consent. Sexual abuse could be rape, could be sexual harassment, it could be indecent assault, but anything that has to do with pleasing someone's sexual urge or sexual gratification of any form without the victim's consent is
Rape.
rape or
Okay.
sexual abuse.
Doctor, I know using date rape as a scenario, let's assume these people are already in a sexual relationship and then one of the parties says no and he or she is forced to go ahead. Are there psychological effects to these kind of situations?
All right, thank you. Yeah, obviously, there are psychological implications to such a situation. Upfront, the individual who is the victim, oftentimes a lady, would feel that she is under pressure and that she has lost the control that she would have had in that relationship. So it is not a good place to be, to know that you cannot say a thing and your word would make sense or determines what happens in a friendship. So in that setting already, the person feels a sense of not being heard or her voice does not count, and that's not a good place to be. But furthermore, beyond that situation of even before the event takes place, after the event, the person feels overwhelmed by that experience. Usually, there will be some confusion in that individual that, okay, what really just happened? So it goes a long way to make the person feel confused. And then over time, that confusion could go into doubts into the person's mind as to what really happened. Did I suggest this? Did I ask for this? Did I lead the person on and all that? Then after that, we can have situations of fear, and then some form of just not being themselves. So a lot goes on in the mind. These are the initial things that will happen before any other major psychological problem will set in. Depending on how this is managed at that initial time, that will determine if the problem in the mind of the victim is properly taken care of, or if it will progress to some other major psychological problem.
Interesting. Okay, now for people who are watching and maybe they've gone through some sort of sexual abuse of one kind or one or the other, whether it's rape or it wasn't total intercourse, whatever, and they want to report this case. Can you explain the process to a victim who has been raped on how they are going to report this?
Okay. For victims, the first step is preserving the evidence, because in law we work with the evidence at hand. So if there's nothing to show that this incident took place, it will be difficult to prove your case. So if the rape happens, or when, let me paint a scenario that, okay, the event has occurred, first things first, do not take your bath. But that is very, very, it's a vital evidence for you. Do not take your baths. First thing you do is you go to the nearest hospital or medical center and have yourself examined. That's the first step. Second step is going to report to a security agency, and then you can now go to their centers such as the Daisy Danjuma Center at Exoti. There's a family unit at the state CID and all of that to get further guidance. But first things first is make sure that the evidence is preserved. Whether you have sheets, maybe bed sheets, you keep them, preserve them, because it will be very, very useful.
Interesting. Okay, what role does societal stigma play in victims' willingness to go forward to report these cases, especially when it is known that you are dating this person or you've had sexual relations with this person? Doctor.
Okay, so stigma is a major issue in our society, and it has to do with the prejudice and the negative conception that people have about an individual. In the case of a relationship, it's assumed that these two people are getting along well and they are friends. And so it would be expected that whatever they do among themselves is consensual and agreed to by both of them. So to be able to come up with a problem in this regard of a rape may be a challenge because of what people perceive as what the relationship looks like between the two people. And then it also been known that there's a level of societal norm or expectation from people generally. There are some things that are supposed to be acceptable. So, for example, in a relationship, it is expected that there's a level of being conservative or being able to be moral that is expected. So, because they are not married, for example, if they are not married people, many people will expect that they will remain as they will abstain from sexual activity. So, by the time sexual activity begin to occur, and then go to the level of probably rape, it may be difficult for individuals who are concerned to be bold enough to step out and talk about it. Now, when anybody talks about being raped, it is not a pleasant thing in our society to hear. And so people would advance possible reasons why it happened. And many of the times, the victim may be blamed that she, most likely a lady, provided the scenario or provided an atmosphere that made it easy for it to happen. So because of that general background that most people have in the back of their mind, it makes it upfront to just blame the victim as maybe the reason or the cause for it. So that puts the victim oftentimes in a very unpleasant situation to be able to come forward with boldness to talk about what did has happened. So I believe that with time, as people get to be better educated, this kind of stigma would actually be taken care of. So it is the stigma, of course, from the perspective of what is expected, that is not being met, that has led to this, that makes the victim to be in a place of disadvantage.
Word. Okay, what are some of those legal challenges a victim might face in the process of filing these complaints?
Okay. First off is ignorance. A lot of people are not aware that there are facilities or there are resources for them. That's why platforms like this are very important and very much welcomed. A lot of persons do not know their rights. A lot of persons do not know that, oh, even if I'm in a relationship with somebody, I can actually say no to this person. Even if I've had sex with this person before, I can still say no this time. I can decide not to do anything with this person. So that is first off one of the challenges that we have. A second challenge is the poor investigation conducted by our security agencies. Because whether a case fails or it succeeds, especially a criminal case, it will be from the how good the investigation is, or how proper the investigation is done. So if the security agencies do not do much in investigations, the judge, like I said, evidence is very important in law. The judge will have no cause than to dismiss the matter or let the perpetrator go. So that is
Yes.
very, very important.
Okay,
Another
but
thing is the issue of compensation by the perpetrator to the victim. We see that a lot. Let's say the victim has come up, she's bold enough or he's bold enough, because now the law actually gives room for the man. The law now recognizes that a man can be assaulted sexually or can be raped, if you use that word.
interesting.
So you see situations like mainly with the women, they come up and they've made the reports, the matter is in court already. It's time to give testimony, and the victim starts saying, lawyer, I don't want to do again. And then you say, "Ah, but you were interested before." The next thing he says, not be your matter, and my matter, I no want to. Then you now discover later that some form of money has been paid to the victims' families, and they decided not to go ahead with the matters. So those are some of the issues that we face. Usually.
I remember a story I saw on, I was following that story up and I was so pained. I think the girl was 10 and she came from Lagos to Asaba to shoot a movie. So while on set, she went to change her outfit for the next scene. And the guy in charge of, the person in charge of wardrobe was a guy. So he went in with her. Her mom went with her because she's underage, and took some time, too long, for her to come out of the dressing room. I don't know why the mom was not alarmed, like, where's my daughter, what's going on? But he took another lady and said, like, this is taking too long to get into the room, and found that she was hearing muffled sounds, but it looks like there was a struggle. So they broke down the door and saw the guy abusing this 10-year-old. And the lady was already angered. So she made the matter go real big. It was all over social media. And several NGOs came into the case and they were willing to pay to carry it to the whatever level. Unfortunately, when they were now comments on Twitter that Nigerian police wasn't picking the boy up. It's been like 2 months. Why is it not picked up and all that? The Nigerian police had to now come on Twitter to address the case and said the mother, this is the message the mother wrote through her lawyer, that they forgiven the guy. She's a Christian and she believes there's a place for forgiveness in her religion. So she's giving him chance to repent, know God and correct his ways. And somewhere in my head, I'm like, with my own picking when I born. Eventually, investigations went on and we found out that something as little as 200K was all was paid.
These are the issues.
I was hurting. I was hurting. All right. So there are some cases where the parents are not even helping. So, Dr. In these cases, how can trauma-informed care help the victims? Whether they paid money or not, you still went through this, and you're still going to go through some. You need to heal. So how can they be helped?
Okay, so it's important for there to be any form of care. The victim has to be willing to engage in care. The victim will be willing to go through the process of reporting and then seeking for help as appropriate. Like it has been said, there is a pathway, first of all, to report what has happened. And the first thing to do, from what our legal practitioner said, is to go to the hospital and subject oneself to physical examination or some evaluation as the case may be. At that point, depending on the facility that the individual, the victim has gone to, the doctor would offer some help, some first aid. Okay, so those first aid would be to take care of the physical health of the victim. So it's important. Whatever the challenges are, the trauma physically ought to be attended to. And then from that standpoint, There's also a need to offer some psychological help. And the initial psychological help will be referred to as a psychological first aid. So psychological first aid is very important to help these individuals to manage the emotional trauma resulting from that situation. Of course, there are a lot of professionals that can offer this, but it depends on the facility that is being approached for help. So there is a place for this. That psychological first aid will go a long way to prevent the long-term effects of the trauma. Just like when somebody has gotten a physical injury, you do your basic first aid with the hope that that first aid will prevent the injury from becoming worsened off. So that's what psychological first aid does. And this individual will be willing to engage with the therapist to begin that process. You will have to talk about what has happened. You will be given enough time to express it as much as possible. But even in doing that, we do find out that many individuals are not free to talk about what really happened. Because some people claim that it makes them to remember the situation, they don't want to remember it.
You relieve it.
And that is not healthy in itself. It's good to let it out. So there's a part of psychological intervention that talks about ventilation, where you have to let out, talk about what has happened, express everything as much as possible to just let out the pain and the hurt. If you have to cry, you cry. If you have to shout, you shout about it and just get it out. So there's a lot that can be done as a form of therapy to help this individual right from the very onset.
Interesting. All right. I went through something recently, and it was really painful. It was a very terrible moment in my life, and everyone who came to visit would ask, what happened? How did it happen? In fact, telling the story every day, I don't know if it helped me, but it was almost as if I was going through it every time I had to tell a group that comes to visit. My church leaves, another set comes, I have to explain. So we came, we now, it's a lot, but I'm better now. So maybe it helped. Okay, is there an intersection between okay, you were saying something. I'll have to take you back where you talked about the law now creating allowances for men. Are there other modifications we need to know of?
Okay. Apart from the law creating allowances for men, the law now recognizes that there's something called oral sex or
Ooh.
other forms of sexual gratifications now. It's not just the
Intercourse.
sexual intercourse now. So the law actually forbids any form of sexual gratifications without consent. So it is clearly stated, even in the Edo State criminal law of Edo State, the VAP, Violence Against Persons Prohibition Law, Edo State, actually talks about any form of openings, whether the mouth, the nose, any form of openings in the body that someone decides to penetrate with either the person's sexual organ or anything at all, just for, so long as it's for the purpose of sexual gratification, and that is done without consent, it is
Sexual abuse.
sexual abuse.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Beautiful. That one not fair day. Because there are just a whole lot of things people have to deal with. All right, I want to know what role educational institutions can play in educating students about consent and healthy relationship, Doctor.
Okay, so it's important to know that in Nigeria, a few studies have been done to look into this issue of date rape. And one common study that was done in the University of Lagos some time ago discovered that this issue of date rape tends to be commoner among the undergraduates. Of course, that stands to reason because usually it's the undergraduate that tend to have, that are down, they have come out of their homes for the first time to now be free to explore their lives and to have relationships. So it tends to be commoner among them. And even among the undergraduates, it tends to be commoner among the younger ones, those who are in their late teenage periods, 19-year-old, 18-year-old, and then early adult period. So if we now understand that many of the people who are involved in date rape are in that category, and they are oftentimes expected to be in school. So it means that it would be good and healthy if there's some form of incorporation of sexual education at that level to help inform these young persons as to what is expected, what is right, and what is wrong, to help them know what their rights are. When they know what their rights are and how to navigate that environment, it will go a long way to help them. Of course, it will help the people who are likely to be perpetrators also to know what is right from what is wrong, and how that the law can actually catch up on them if they do what is wrong. So it will go a long way if information like this is incorporated into our educational system. In the university, for example, we do have some basic courses that they call general
Okay,
studies.
let me pause today.
Consent for kids. This is you. Okay, it doesn't look exactly like you, but let's say it's you. This is your body, and you get to decide what you do with your body. No one else is entitled to tell you what to do with your body. Not your friends, not strangers, not adults you know. No one is entitled to decide what you do with your body. Except you. That's called bodily autonomy, by the way. And that's what consent is all about. Everyone is different. Some people love to hug, and some people hate hugs. And each person gets to decide what they're comfortable with. Can a hug-loving person just start hugging someone at random? Nope. They need consent. How do people know if they have consent? They ask. Would you like a hug?
Yes, I would. Can I hold your hand?
I'd rather not.
Okay.
If a person doesn't say yes,
Can I hug you?
then they haven't given their consent. It's really pretty simple. Ask for consent, listen to the answer. By the way, if a person bribes someone or threatens someone to say yes, that's not consent. Sometimes adults will try to tell a kid what to do with their body,
Go kiss Aunt Doris goodbye.
but the kid still gets to decide. No thanks, that makes me uncomfortable. I'll just wave goodbye. Some things kids can't consent to. They can't enter into legal contracts. They can't vote. And they can't consent to sexual stuff, 'cause they're kids. So if an adult does something that kids can't consent to, that's not okay. The adult is wrong, and it's not the kid's fault. And that's when it's most important to tell a trusted adult, like a teacher. Why? Because it's your body, and no one else is entitled to tell you what to do with it. Practice consent.
Okay, we had to push play to that video because this whole issue of consent usually starts from the home front. Most of these men that do not understand when women say no, they did not learn from home that you can say no and you have a right to say no, and I will just accept your no and move on. So we need to start teaching our kids to express themselves, say no when they mean no, and teach them to also understand that people can say no to you even though you're not cool with their no, and you have to live with it. All right, so we're talking about how we can incorporate information about sexual anything sexual, information about sex into our educative system, and you were on that. Can we just pick up from there?
Okay, so I had mentioned that because of the fact that the problem was more reported among the undergraduates, it's healthy and important that the undergraduate curriculum has got some information on that. But ideally, the education about sex and all that surrounds it should actually start from the primary school. And because those are the very important formative years for the child. So I think it's important that right from the onset, this thing should be incorporated into the primary school educational system. There are various subjects where proper topics can be crafted in to help the young children begin to talk about the issue of consent, to be able to know about their bodies and the proper use and handling of their bodies. So right from primary school, into secondary school. And of course, if for any reason the child is not opportune to get those information at those levels, then the university becomes almost the ultimate point where that education would be given. And I think it's important that we emphasize this again and again because the, the world we live in tends to move in the direction of some of these events happening and they become more rampant as the years go by. So that's the more reason why we need to emphasize about the need for this education at various levels. Having said that, education is not left for the school alone. I think charity, they say, begins at home. So parents have the first responsibility to educate and train up their children on the right values that they ought to adopt. And it is known that if a child is taught the right values right from a very tender age, he or she will grow up with those values. And the child is likely to maintain such perspective about life and how things ought to be done. And the child will carry those into the adult age and would also have the possibility of passing on the same value to his or her own children when the time comes. So even though we've talked about the educational system, but I think a lot has to rest with the family to begin to teach and emphasize these things again and again to their children as they raise them up. And that will go a long way to actually help.
Okay, so this is my final question to you because we're running out of time. And what preventive measures will you suggest to reduce these incidences of date rape? There are so many date rape cases that are not reported because what will people say? How will people perceive me if I come out to say my boyfriend raped me? Or I went to hang out with a guy that I just met on Facebook and then I went to his house and all that. So what can we do? How can we suggest preventive measures to these people to reduce these incidents of date rape or sexual abuse of any kind?
Thank you. First off, I want to talk to victims of rape. I want to say it is not your fault. You did not do anything wrong. It is not your fault at all. So going forward, with the advent of social media, a lot of things have been happening. You see things online, and then as young adults or adolescents, you see them want to copy or emulate things that they watch and all that. So one of the preventive measures would be to screen or scrutinize whatever we watch or whatever we see online. Not everything online is good for you, because I know I read it somewhere, the doctor can confirm, it is mostly those things that we view or that we watch tend to leave a lasting effect in our minds. So it goes over and over again in our heads, and before we know what's happening, the urge is there to want to practice and all of that. And then we should learn that consent is consent. And if consent is not given, whatever you do from there is wrong. Even if you have been chatting and your partner has agreed, oh, I'm going to come to the house, I'm going to watch movies, and from there and then on, we would have sex and all that. Even if the person comes to the house and after watching movies, he now says, or she now says, I don't want to have sex anymore. Anything you do from there is wrong, is rape, sexual abuse. So we should learn that no is no, yes is yes. And another preventive measure I think of is when you're not sure of somebody, you don't know the person, do not go to hidden places with this person. And always let your parents or guardians know where you're going to. Let them into your friends and your acquaintances. Let people know where you're going to. Don't think that you're too old or you're too young to tell somebody where you're going. Let somebody know exactly where you're going to. And for parents, they should be open enough to receive their children's friends in. I know a lot of parents have such issues. They are not welcoming enough to the friends of their kids. But if you don't know your children's friends, to be able to teach them, oh, I don't like this person, or notice one thing or the other wrong with the association that they move with or the associations that they keep, you will not be able to lead them in the right direction. I think parents should always create time for their kids, and they should always learn to teach them right steps to take. And I'm sure this issue of sexual abuse or rape will be reduced
In
drastically.
no time.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Doctor, your final words on this topic.
Okay, I would say that young people generally and everybody should be careful about the relationships that they keep. The choice of friendship should be carefully thought through. And having said that, it's important to note that if you have any idea or any instinct in your mind about something not just being right, sometimes it's just good to take those caution based upon your instinct and just do something about it and just not let it slide. It's important to do that. It's also important that for anyone that desires eventually to have a friendship or a relationship, it's good you declare your morals and your values and your expectations from the beginning and define those friendships properly. And like we have been told, it's important to always conduct friendships in safe environments. It's very important we do that in a safe environment. There are some environments wherein you sit with someone to have a conversation that even if the person was not having a wrong idea, he or she could begin to conceive such ideas. So it's good to have safe environments for interaction generally. I would also say that for those who have gone through these challenges, they should seek help. Seeking help will help them a lot. And then in seeking help, it also somehow brings out the importance of this problem to those who might fall victims subsequently. So it's good we do this. The issue of the social media has been mentioned, and for the young people these days, social media is a major thing. I wish to God I would have some individuals who would want to put things out there frequently on the social media to educate the young persons more, because the young people are more on the social media. I wish to God there are people who put up some little clips, some little things that will go a long way and be far-reaching in educating people about this problem and help to teach people on what to do to take care of themselves and to prevent being victims as much as possible.
All right. I want to say thank you to both of you for your time and for dealing with this topic. I'm very satisfied. Now, the issue of rape is a very sensitive one, and a lot of women, I know men too, there are guys who've been raped even by fellow guys, especially children, underage boys. It's the people who come out to speak isn't even up to a quarter of the people who are going through these or have been through these, and they are not saying anything about it. And it's a very sad situation. But we need to start teaching people to understand that no is no. We played a video at the beginning of the show, and I'm just going to read through what that video said for those who do not understand. So if you're still struggling with understanding what consent is, it's because you do not accept to take whatever the person says that we're having this problem. Then just imagine that when you're about to have sex with someone, it means you want to make tea for the person. Equate it to making tea. So if you say, would you love a cup of tea? A guy says, this is a girl-guy scenario. And the girl says, yeah, I would love a cup of tea, thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. And then you go ahead to make the tea. But if you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you can decide to make the cup of tea or not. But do not assume that they must drink the tea. But be aware that they might not drink the tea. All right? And if they don't drink the tea, then this is the important part. Don't make them drink the tea. Don't force them because you made tea. It doesn't mean that because you make tea, they must drink tea. Okay? Now, if you also ask, should I make a cup of tea for you? And the person says, no, thank you. An outright no. Please don't go ahead to make them tea and try to convince them that they need tea. All right? And don't get annoyed when they tell you they don't want tea, they don't want sex. All right. If you also say, can I make you a cup of tea? And they says, yes, please. That's very kind of you. And then you go ahead, you make tea. The tea arrives and they tell you, I don't want tea again. Please, I know it can be very annoying, but It doesn't matter. They said no. So they are under no obligation to drink tea. They don't want tea. So move around. They wanted tea before, now they don't. So someone can change their mind between the time it took you to go put water on fire, get the tea, add milk and whatever. I can change my mind. Same thing applies to sex. So it's okay for people to change their mind. You are not entitled to force them. Okay, in a situation where the person is unconscious, they got a drug. Unconscious people don't drink tea. So if I'm unconscious, I can't be possibly asking you for sex. Or I was conscious before and I said, I want tea. Then before you brought the tea, I'm now unconscious. No, you can't force the tea down my throat in my unconscious state. Unconscious people cannot give you consent for sex. So put your tea cup down and make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is important again. All right, don't make them drink the tea. Don't force people to drink the tea. So in a situation where someone wears a dress that says I want tea, because the person is dressed with a cloth that says I want tea, does not mean you must give the person tea. You will still ask. Oh, she dressed that way, she was asking for it. There's so many scenarios we can paint that people hide under to abuse or rape. Please ask questions, listen to the answers, and accept whatever answer that is given to you. That's what we're trying to say. Teach your children the right way to act as responsible persons. Respect is very important in dealing with the issue of sexual abuse. I want to say thank you for watching the show today. We're going to put the video on YouTube so you can always catch up and learn. Reach out if you need help. All right, so that I wanted tea last week does not mean I'm going to want tea this week. That I wanted tea last night does not mean I will want tea in the morning. Understand me? I'm Daisy Leo Asikidi. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back again next week with another issue.